Hey, Link here. Thanks for joining me for episode 88, where I speak with Kris Durrschmidt, where we talk about topics like how their development story began, words of wisdom from their experiences, making Volgarr, their favorite games, their life outside of gaming, and some lightning round questions. Before we get started, don't forget there are links in the episode description that you can follow to learn more about Kris as well as the podcast. Also, don't forget to like and share the episode, and without further ado, enjoy episode 88. Hi, and welcome to the Red Tunic Podcast, a podcast where I look to rediscover what makes gaming fun and enjoyable by having positive conversations with those related to the industry. My name is Link, and today I'm joined by Kris Durrschmidt, CEO of Crazy Viking Studios and maker of Volgarr the Viking. Hi, Kris. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I am doing all right. I'm doing all right. Sorry, I was saying that and trailing off while thinking of my week. It's been a week. Fraught with migraines and insomnia flare-ups. But
Ooh, I get those every once in a while.
oh, they're so much fun, especially when they suddenly decide. In my case, I take melatonin, but they're so much fun when the flare-up is like, yeah, that melatonin means nothing to me. You can stay up and suffer for 6 hours or what have you. So yeah, but it's the end of a good week for me, I should say, because I have the next week or so off. So, it's great in my part.
Yay! Time off's always good.
Yes. Yes, it always is, right?
Or time to play games.
In this case, that's what I'm hoping to do. Hoping to try and kill some of the backlog that is, never ceasing to exist because I'm an idiot and I keep buying games on sale or humble bundles or what have you.
Oh boy. Yeah, I didn't realize I have multiple thousands of games on Steam now, and I don't even know. Like sometimes I go to buy a game and go, "Oh, I have it already." Wow.
So, I thought I was going to be able to make a joke there, but multiple thousands, I think you are beating me. I'm definitely, double thousands, but the multiple is scary there. So I pray for your backlog sanity.
That could have been a big fat lie too. I can while we're speaking here, I've just actually look up and look at the exact count. It might not be that many. I might have to sit there because I know people have way more than me, but I do have lots of games sitting on my shelf that still have the freaking plastic wrap on them.
I personally try and make it a habit of peeling those off, getting rid of it.
So you don't feel bad?
Yeah. You actually took the words right out of my mouth. Because if the plastic wrap is there, I feel guilty. Like, I feel like there's that compulsion of going, I could just return this as an unopened or sell it. But then, I bought it for a reason. Even if I hate yeah, exactly. Even if I hate myself for not getting to it, I bought it for a reason. I like to think.
So there you are, sitting in your game room, playing the game that you played for the 300th time, and you just happen to turn your head slowly over to the right and see that wrap game sitting on the shelf, just glaring back at you, judging you.
Exactly, and it can't glare at me judgingly if the wrap's off. It can ignore the fact that I'm playing like Kirby or Mario 3 for like the umpteenth time. It doesn't get that power over me when it's naked,
Yep.
So Kris, before we get started though, if you don't mind, could you tell me and anyone listening a little bit about yourself? Like, an easier way to phrase this question, I guess, would be if there were some things that you feel if someone wanted to get like the quick and easy of who, what have you, of who you are, that would be the kind of thing I'm asking. Sorry, I bumbled up probably a much simpler question by trying to elaborate on it.
And now I'm really confused. Let's try that again.
Before we get started, if there was anything about yourself that you feel people definitely need to know, would you mind sharing that? There we go.
That people need to know about me?
Yeah, not about me.
Well, that they need to know about me. Oh, I make video games. Outside of that, I like Italian sports cars, and I like to cook mostly like fancy food just to challenge myself, I guess. But I really like making pizzas, which is kind of crazy. That goes back to being a teenager. I used to work at pizza places, and I found that to be cathartic. So I just kind of fall back into that.
Interesting. Thank you for that. We might touch on that a little later, because I think there's something a little later that I can prod you with for that one. But no, thank you for that. That's interesting. I don't know if that'll come up in terms of many other questions, but there is one that I'll pull it back to later on.
Awesome. And it's 389 games. So I don't have that. That's still a stupid big number, though.
I'm curious. I'm curious how you went from how you got multiple thousand out of 389.
I guess I added a zero by mistake in my brain.
Always
it feels like there's like a crazy amount of games that I don't ever play on there. So
let's also be honest though. Any amount of games that you are worried you'll never get to is a crazy amount of games. That is like a peak first world problem, right?
Yep, certainly is. Especially in those Steam sales show up and you buy another 40 games or whatever it is every time. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. I think luckily in my case the removal of what's the word? The lack of bundles popping up as much as they are, kind of a nice thing, but at the same time, kind of not. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because I think that was like my biggest downfall was the amount of bundles. Because like I personally be like, oh hey, a bundle, oh hey, a bundle, oh hey, a bundle. Especially when Steam was like 90%, like when they weren't afraid of people doing refunds on everything.
Yeah.
I just buy a bundle. I didn't care. Oh hey, a bundle. Oh hey, a bundle. And somehow I end up with, like a full series for like $3. I'm like, well, okay, that's never.
Do you ever find yourself buying or going to buy a bundle? I find myself in this situation often where I'm like, oh, that bundle looks great. And I go click on it to buy it, and then Steam throws up this warning going, you own 5 out of the 10 games in this bundle. I'm like, oh. Okay.
So, yes, I've had that, and unfortunately for me, that has sometimes worked against my sanity because I'm like, well, I could, instead of paying $10 for the bundle, now I only have to pay $4. And then I kind of get into that moment of, oh, it's only $4. And, I have to.
Do they only partially charge you now?
Oh, yeah, yes. If you're
it didn't used to be like that.
Yeah, so now bundles have discounts, and sometimes the discounts like they add up, right? Like if you own 5 of the 10. But sometimes if you look at it, you end up paying less to finish it than you would if you bought the game alone, just due to how the crazy math works. I see it more on like bundles of 1 or 2 games, where like each game alone, let's say, is $5. The bundle is $9, but which then makes it $4.50. So if you own one of them, it makes it even less because it takes off the top, and then you end up paying less for the game than you would otherwise because of compounding percentage math. I'm not good with math. I'm not going to pretend to understand, but yes, it does discounts on top of bundles now.
That's awesome because from my understanding, it didn't used to work like that. It was just like the bundle's the bundle, and if you own the games already, then oh well, too bad. You're going to spend extra money, and that's why they gave you the warning. Wow, I learned something new today. Thank you, Link. That was pretty cool.
No worries. Now here is the other kind of thing about it though. If you do own it and you buy the bundle, you're only getting that one game. So it still gives you the warning that you're not getting the extra keys because you're paying just for
you can't gift it or something.
Yes, and you also can't give bundles at all, period, now, I think, which is something you used to be able to do, which I used to.
Interesting.
I used to do a lot with people that were outside of the region that could get it. So like when they did all of Fallout for like $13, and they didn't offer it in Australia. Well, you get $13 from a friend in Australia, and they get the bundle for $13 versus like 56 or whatever.
That's clever.
Sometimes. I'm not gonna stand on trying to act like I'm always clever. Now, Kris, I do want to ask, not to ignore that and abruptly shift. But I'm curious, how is it that you got into developing and making video games?
I'm gonna to answer on this particular podcast. I'm going to answer that question very briefly and cleanly, and the reason for that is because the story is not safe for work.
Okay, then.
And if anybody wants to learn the full, in detailed story of that, if you Google my name, I'm sure you will find it. But the short end of it is I sold. I was in the military. I got out. I worked a contracting job for Northrop Grumman for a while, building at the time a top secret submarine for the Navy SEALs. And I ended up hating that job. I used to pull up into the parking lot and spend like an hour convincing myself to go to work. If you ever seen the movie Office Space, that's what it was like. I just hated it. and so girlfriend and I at the time, who's now my wife, decided her family was out on the West Coast. Let's just reboot our lives, go out there and try our luck and see what happens. And I've always been an artist. I've was going to go to school for being a comic book artist. That's what I thought I was going to do. My little brother got sick, and we couldn't afford to go to. I couldn't afford to go to college. That's how I ended up in the military, so I get that college money. But once you go into the military, it kind of changes you a little bit. And when I got out, that's when this other stuff I just told you about happened. You start to wonder, like, okay, well, is that a viable thing to do or whatever? So we moved out to the West Coast. And I was one day in the newspaper, because back then I'm so old. We used to look for jobs in newspapers. By the way, kids, it's not on the internet anymore. You used to go to the back of the newspaper and look for jobs. So I was doing that, and I saw this job for a police sketch artist. I'm like, well, I can draw. That sounds freaking awesome on TV shows and stuff. I'll be a police sketch artist. That sounds rad. So I called up the number. And it turned out it was a misprint in the newspaper. It was supposed to be for a video game studio that was looking for a background artist. And somehow the phone numbers got mixed up, and the police sketch artist got that phone number for the game studio. So when I called, I was really surprised to find out it was a game studio. And they're like, well, wait a minute. What were you applying to? I told them, well, it was supposed to be for a police sketch artist. And they're like, well, you're an artist. We'll give you an art test and see how you do. And I did the art test. And then a whole bunch of not safe for work stuff happened. Because at the time, and this is the part that I have to be very careful about talking about. At the time, it was because we just moved out to West Coast, I did not have a way to make money. So I was drawing certain kinds of pictures in the early days of the internet for a German website that involved not safe for work stuff. And they were paying me $100 a page to do that. So that's what I was doing. And that's all I had to show for an art portfolio at the time at the interview. And turns out that the game company was a Mormon-run video game company that only was at the time making video games for children. And I ended up getting a job, and the rest is history. That was like 20-something years ago now, 25 years, I think, somewhere in there. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, again, if anybody wants more details on that story, they can just Google me and find it. It's there. It's a pretty funny story, but I have to be very careful talking about it because, yeah. Anyhow, that's how I got into games, totally by accident.
So thank you for sharing that. Now I definitely have some questions, and to be completely upfront, honest, I I typically don't do a whole lot of research into people outside of the games that they've made, mainly because I don't want to come in with preconceived notions of where questions will go or what have you, what have you, what have you, right? So I mean, no offense when I say I didn't know that. That's very interesting, and it leads me to ask. I'm trying the best way to phrase it. What? How? How did you think that was going to go applying to be a police sketch artist with that as your portfolio as well?
Very detail oriented.
um, you know, yes, I imagine that would be an argument to be made. So I'm glad it worked out for you, and I'm not going to lie. One of the things I've always only half jokingly said is I wish I had devoted more time to doing drawing and artwork type stuff when I was younger to be better at it. Because as I'm sure anyone knows, that not safe for work subsection of digital art, if you can get the following and what have you, can be very well paying. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
far be it from me to ever stick my nose up at someone doing that, because I know how well that can pay, and I've always been kind of jealous that I didn't buckle down and get better to do the same thing,
Yeah. Yep. It's a
Um,
definitely a thing. And here's the funny thing about that is I was doing that like before it was a thing. Like, does that make sense? Like it's that kind of art. Again, we have to be very careful about talking about this right now. But that kind of art is very popular now. It's like a thing, especially like people seem to think that that was something that was invented in Japan. It wasn't. It's been around for a very long time. It's just that it was popularized by a certain subset of culture there, and and human animal. Uh,
I think it's safe to
not the acts, but the uh, animals that look like humans.
Yeah, I hate the word too, just because I can never pronounce it. But I think it's safe to say furries, because that's, I don't think that's an insulting thing to say.
Okay, good, because I wasn't clear and I didn't want to say it first because I wasn't sure if I was going to insult anybody by saying furry. Like I didn't, or whatever that subgroup is
Yeah,
of the thing that they're into.
I very much believe furries is fine. If it's not, I'm very sorry. I'm under the impression it is fine. So
But yes, if you're a good artist and there's lots of money to be made there for sure if that's your thing. But
um, but yeah, but very interesting to come up from that into making games. Now, the follow-up question I have for this one is usually, do you have any words of wisdom that you can share from those experiences? And I imagine outside of, I ignoring the obvious of make sure you're contacting the right company, what is there any that you would give to people that were looking to to get into doing things based on what you've learned? And in full honesty, I know this is kind of a hard question, especially in your case, because you've been doing this, as you said, for like 20 plus or what have you years at this point. The times have changed or what have you. So if there isn't much, completely understandable, but yeah, if there's any words of wisdom you feel you can share, by all means, please.
oh goodness gracious, I could do several semesters of college courses on this, but um, I will say don't do what I did. That won't fly today. My thing was just like the stars aligning, the universe, and all that stuff, and lots of hilarity and just stumbles and oopsie daisies. The game industry then was a very different place. Um, Now the advice I would give to somebody is if you want to make video games, Now here's the awful thing, but also the awesome thing at the same time. And I'm trying not to go down this rabbit hole because this is a really big discussion. I'm gonna try to cram it down really, really small. The video game industry is rapidly changing. It's changing in my professional opinion here, for something that used to be these big tentpole Call of Duties and Assassin's Creeds and these massive, massive, you know, big GTAs and Red Dead Redemptions, these massive multi-million-dollar projects, and becoming smaller and less frequent. And the industry is growing into more of a creative indie tentpole type place. So the reason I bring that up is because your goal, and it's okay if this is your goal, but your goal probably shouldn't be, I want to get into the games industry and work on Call of Duty. Like, unless that is like your dream to actually make a Call of Duty game, that shouldn't be your thing. Like, I want to get in there and make AAA games or whatever. And the reason for that is because you can do yourself a disservice. Because the way to really be successful nowadays, I feel, is to make smaller experiences with smaller teams and, you know, do more creative experiences. Now, to get into the game industry, what I would do if I was trying to do it today is I would make sure I'm getting really good grades in school. I would go to a college, but not like a traditional college. Probably, I would probably go to what would be considered a trade school college for games. Like I would go to Full Sail or Digipen. Those two schools will best prepare you for a role in the games industry. But even then, the games industry itself, if you try to go down a traditional route, is extremely competitive. So you'd have to really focus on your schoolwork and all that other stuff. But one of the best ways to get attention when trying to get work or a job, and it sounds crazy to say this, but is to actually make a video game. Make a bunch of small little video games that you can complete on your own, because what that demonstrates is that you understand all aspects of all the very difficult things that have to come together in order to make, you know, some of the most complex software that humankind knows, right? So um, that would be my advice.
So, thank you very much for that. And I say this pretty much every time. But like, I love hearing the reiteration. I don't know if that's the right word. I love hearing either way people continuously saying, just do a game, make games, finish, like put them out there, get something done to show that you understand it, that you can do it. And I always use the same analogy, but it's kind of like, the 9 out of 10 dentists. If 9 of them are saying this is the thing to do, so thank you for that. I love hearing that advice. I love hearing that like be reinforced, because it just says how important it really is from people that are seeing it, that have experienced it or are trying, right?
Yeah,
So
well, you couldn't say that 10 years ago. 10 years ago, that was not a thing that you could like really do. You'd need a team, you need all these things, but there's no reason why a single person can't make a video game today with all the tools and all the knowledge and everything that's available to them. It's super easy. You don't have to try. Your first game you shouldn't be trying to make Destiny or Call of Duty as your first game. You should be trying to make Asteroids and Pac-Man and stuff like that. And there's all kinds of tools out there that let you do that now. You've got Game Maker, you've got Multimedia Fusion, you've got Unity. Yes, you have Unreal. You can make small, simple games in Unreal, but there's so many tools and so many game engines, and so many free art programs, and so many free music makers and things out there, and audio, sound effects and stuff like that. That you can do that, and you should do that, because again, like I said, making video game software is some of the most complex software that is known to humans, and you have to be good at so many things in order to make a video game work. And by making even small video games, you demonstrate you understand like a majority of the aspects of it.
So yeah, thank you. I understand what you're saying completely. And for anyone that's listening that doesn't fully get what that might mean, like 10 years ago was 2014. That was kind of like the beginning of the indie scene, or that was when indies were a little easier to start seeing around, because I remember things like Gish and Iggy and I always forget the other one. It's about it's a mermaid, not a mermaid, but it's an underwater aqua something or other. But either way, all those older indie games, it was much harder to see. And then, like you're saying, 10 years ago it wasn't exactly easy or possible without a small team or what have you. Like the rise of the indie scene, so to say, and like now we have all these nice things that you can do it with, so it's not as daunting. Sorry, I was trying to add on or what have you, add some context to it. And I think I just rambled into nonsense. I'm sorry.
That's totally fine. I mean, you're right. Like, and it's around, I think it was 2009 or 10. Is where you had like the first really big thing start to pop up, like like the first big truly successful like mainstream indie games started popping up. It would be like Alien Hominid, I think Braid, Super Meat Boy. Those games kind of hit in that area, and then the second wave of it would have been like our game, which was Volgarr the Viking, Shovel Knight, Guacamelee, and those, right, and then the kind of like the floodgates opened after that. So yeah, it's I don't know where I went with that either just now. It's just all I'm trying to say to young people out there, if you want to get into video games, I just gave you the roadmap, and other people have too. That's really what you have to do. Get on YouTube and watch some videos and get some of this free software out there and start making stuff, man. It's I used to tell people all the time when it comes to art. You had mentioned earlier you had wished you had done some more art and stuff like that. Art isn't something, being able to draw and draw well or paint well and stuff like that is not something you're born with. It's not a talent. And I hate hearing that when people go, "Oh, you're so talented." It's like, no, lady or sir. I spent my entire life working at it's a skill. Like you don't go to Stephen Curry and go, "Oh, you're so talented, you can hit those free throws." It's like, no, he works all day long shooting free throws. That's all he freaking does. Like, no wonder he's good at it. Like, that's all he does. It's a skill. Like, if anybody can learn how to draw, anybody can learn how to paint. You're a human. You're not dumb. It's just it takes practice and time. But what you're doing is you're sacrificing that time and practice that you're putting into that from other things. Like, I'm never going to be able to shoot a free throw like Stephen Curry because, I learned how to draw stuff and make video games. That's what you put your eggs in that basket, right? So that's how it goes. But anybody can make a video game. You put the time and effort into it.
Exactly. I think that's a very good way to put it, and hopefully everyone can understand that one because it's pretty straightforward. Now, I do want to ask this one only because your game, Volgarr the Viking, when I'm kind of wondering what led you to make that game. And one of the reasons I asked this is because when I first played it, and I mentioned this to you, but when I reached out to you initially, that, or at least I'm fairly confident I did, but like it very much reminded me, more or less gameplay wise, stylistically, graphically, what have you, of like the games that my friend and I used to play 30 years, give or take, at this point, on his dad's like 386. I think it was a 386. It wasn't it wasn't the Pentium series, I can say that much. But like it very much, even way back when I first played it was a very nostalgic game for me. And I'm wondering, like, what was it that made you want to make that kind of game? Like, were there games that you played when you were younger that was like, oh yeah, this is it, and it had a lasting impression on you, or what have you, or like, was that just something you wanted to make and you just made it? I hope what I'm asking makes sense. I'm sorry, I know it's kind of rambly.
Oh, no, it totally does. So it's actually a really big question. There's a couple things I want to talk about there. Yes, you're right. It's based on games and stuff that we played as kids and what we grew up with. So Taryn and I, who's the engineer that worked on that game, we are big fans of arcade games and fans of the Super Nintendo era things like Actraiser. I'm a big fan of Rastan and Capcom games of that era, the CPS1, CPS2 system games, which would be like Magic Sword and things like that. Black Tiger is another one that was one. I think it was a CPS1 game. So these arcade games and the look and feel of those games are what we enjoyed. When we decided to make that, we also had a lot of experience at the studio that we worked together at before, making brawling games, fighting games, things of that nature, action games. And we were both very passionate about kinetic gameplay as well. So we figured that our first game should be something that we had a deep understanding of, and that we would have the best chance of being successful with. And so we chose a platformer. Ultimately, the look, we knew that we wanted to have something look like games that we were passionate about from that time period. So that's where that art style came from. But the theme of it being Volgarr the Viking was something that was actually kind of funny. We didn't have a name for the game company. We didn't have an actual theme for the game. And we're like, well, somebody, I don't remember who said this. It could have been Taryn or somebody in our close circle of friends. Somebody said, well, my, how do I phrase this? My demeanor at work is very big. I am a person that can be fairly intense and exciting. So, and I'm also a 6'1" Viking dude. So they said, well, why don't you we couldn't think of something cool. We're trying to think of something cool for our company. A lot of people got things like, there's a cool game company out there now that just started called Probably Monsters. That's a really cool name. And you have, what's the, I'm sorry, I'm totally brain farting. The Behemoth, and Team Meat. Like, you have all these really cool names for these game studios, and we couldn't think of one. Like, we were just like, two guys make games. Like, oh, that, and then this guy came over and said, well, you're like a 6'1", big, crazy Viking looking dude. So why don't you just call it Crazy Viking Studios? And Taryn and I just gonna laugh and say, okay. So Crazy Viking Studios it is. And then we struggled with what the theme of the first game should be. And the guy was like, well, your studio name is Crazy Viking. It'd be really weird to not make your first game be about a Viking. Like, so we're like, oh, okay. So that's kind of how that came about. We knew we wanted to make a platformer, an action puzzle platformer, like Volgarr the Viking turned out to be, and we knew we wanted to look like a Capcom era game, and the game was inspired directly by Super Ghouls and Ghosts, from the jumping mechanics and puzzles and the gameplay and themes from Rastan and Magic Sword, but we didn't know, if it was going to be a barbarian or a medieval knight or a giant chicken with a sword. Like, we didn't know any of that until somebody said, well, just make it a Viking game. We're like, okay, cool. So it's kind of a funny story, but also kind of like, man, I wish it was a little bit more exciting than that. But it's just how it was, and we figured that would be something that people would gravitate towards, I guess. One of the reasons why we didn't make it like a generic barbarian game at the time was because we just wanted it to stand out. Like, at the time that Volgarr the Viking had come out, the only other Norse-inspired or Viking mythology, Viking fantasy game that was out at the time was a game called Viking by Sega, which I love. I thought that game was really, really rad, but that was like the only thing out there. So we kind of found a niche. Like, it's like, oh, there's not anything out there that's like that. So let's just do that.
So, thank you for sharing that. And I find you mentioning the older game studios, and you know, current ones too are kind of similar in how the naming goes. But it's just remembering the names that studios had around the era of like the indie pop off. I'm just gonna call it that. Um, are always interesting to see, and like how it's kind of shaped forward, and how, you know, now names are made and they're not serious either. And when you look back, you know, years and years ago, they were, I don't want to say they're corporate, because I'm sure there's a history to some of them where they weren't, you know, it's just kind of like looking at it through the lens of, you know, 20 years after the fact. And this is like in the late 90s, kind of 20 years after the fact. But like, you know, Epic Games was, I forget what it's beforehand, but it still had like Epic in it or something like that. And it was, you know, corporate and kind of boring in the sense of, you know, it just wasn't fun. And I'm not saying that to be diminishing or dismissive of what the backing to it was. I'm just meaning like, you know, you get stuff like you said, Behemoth or Crazy Viking Studios or what have you, where like it's like something flipped and people went, our studio names can just be fun now. And
Yeah.
they
Do
shed
you
that
know what?
corporate.
You know what? Sorry to interrupt you there, but do you know what Capital Computers became?
No.
Capital Computers was a Japanese company that became Capcom.
I was gonna make that guess, but I didn't know, because you know, I'm not gonna lie, Capcom. It's hard to comment too much on Capcom because I'm 36. I've been playing Capcom games since I was like 4, kind of thing. So like that name's really ubiquitous for my life, for my world. But like even Capcom, their name, I don't know if it would be considered fun. It's far more fun than Capital Computers, though. Like that, I can say without a doubt for me.
For sure, but if you look at like their logo and stuff now, it's like when it became Capcom, it's like this fun yellow, blue, and gold. The way that they use the font is fun and it looks cool and it's fun to say. Whereas before, you know, you can imagine the company being like an Arial font that had nothing to it. It was just we're Capital Computers Incorporated, right? So
You know, yes. In under that lens, I 100% agree. Like, you know, in the 90s when they rebranded to that, I just looked it up quick just to see when they actually started using this logo. But yeah, you're right. In the shift to that nice blue and yellow, that is way more fun than just whatever the font was as just a black, boring logo type that any designer from the era would have hammered the rule of it has to work on a fax machine nonsense. Um,
yeah, that's why
which
we have a goofy looking logo too, the silly looking Viking with the sword up in the air and stuff like that. I mean, we're looking around at everybody else's like logos and things, and you know, the Behemoth has a giant fat chicken and like all these different things. And we're like, oh yeah, we need to be memorable in some regard in that aspect, so people will hopefully see that and buy our games. Um, but yeah, I completely lost what we're supposed to be talking about because I was just having fun talking about games, and I don't know what I'm doing now. Sorry.
no, it's all good. You know, I kind of I lost the plot too for a minute there. We were talking about logo design and names and all that. So, you know, let me kind of put us back on some form of track, I guess. Um, I'm curious if you don't mind speaking to this, if you have like a favorite game or like a perfect game, because I know favorite game is, you know, can be really difficult to answer because, you know, it can be like, well, favorite when I was a kid, favorite when, you know, whatever. So yeah, like, do you have any like favorite games, or do you have like your idea of a perfect game or what have you that you would mind sharing?
I will say that no game is perfect. Uh, but I will say that well, I play Rastan a lot because I just happen to like that game a lot. I play Magic Sword a lot. I play a lot of games from that era. Um, Trying to think of like a modern game that sucks in my time a lot right now. I like games that I don't have to. Nope. Let me reboot myself. That's not correct either. I'm trying. I was gonna say I like games with shorter experiences and things I can jump in and out of, but that's just right now because I got 2 little kids and I don't have a lot of time. But I spent like 1,000 hours in Skyrim, and I've been playing the heck out of Dragon's Dogma 2. Um, So I do like those big games also. But I do find myself mostly gravitating to towards the smaller games and old arcade games. Recently, I've been playing a lot of Time Pilot. I don't know if you've ever played that game before. That game's super cool. There's a game called Two Tigers. It's an old arcade game where you fly this airplane around, try to bomb and blow up these ships. It's a really cool effect. You should look that game up if you've never seen it. I want to bring more attention to that game because it's rad and it's super rare. Yeah, a lot of times I just play my pinball machines and arcade machines. And favorite game right now would be, if I had to pick a favorite game right now, what would it be? I think it would be Chivalry 2. Just because of the absurdity of it. I killed a guy by cutting off his head and throwing his own head at him, at his teammate.
You know, like as someone who leans very hard into absurdist humor kind of stuff, yes, I 100% understand how and why Chivalry would be up there.
Because killed the guy with a chicken, threw a chicken at him, and he died, and I just spent the next 10 minutes just laughing and losing a bunch of points because I couldn't play the game.
Yes, you know, and that's, I think, in those games, those kind of games that allow for that. Yeah, like, you know, screw the points when you can brain someone with a damn chicken, right? Like, you know,
or when he respawns, hit him with his own head from the previous life. Like, that's like what?
You know, I don't think anyone would fault you, or at least I wouldn't fault you at being inconsolable after that, because I 100% would be inconsolable after that. And especially if I had the presence in that moment to say, I'm going to take this guy's head and brain him with his own head after as well, you know?
People rage quitting.
Now, I do want to speak to this because I just did a quick lookup of Two Tigers, and I don't remember the name of the game, but I've on Twitter, I'm following a developer, and I'm kicking myself for not remembering it right now. But they're making a game that very much looks like looks like it's inspired by Two Tigers. So like, yeah, this looks like Two Tigers looks like it would be fun because from a few screenshots, I more or less immediately understand what this game is about. There was, oh man, I'm really hating myself right now. Luftriser was kind of like it, if you're familiar with that game.
I remember that one. Yeah, it was like, well, it was a mobile game at first, I think, where it was like you touched. Yeah, I think it started as a mobile game and then became a console or Steam game. I don't remember. There's some kind of story with that game like that.
But
that was a game that was red and black, or right?
Minimal color palette, yes.
Yeah, minimal color palette, and then it would dive if you had to like hold the button down for it to spin up and move, and yeah.
Yes. So you know, just from like the few screenshots I've seen from Two Tigers, it very much reminds me of the other game that I'm not remembering the name of right now. But like, yeah, this looks like it would be a fun game. I'm going to try and figure out how to check it out later. And I say it that way only because I've never had good luck with emulating arcade games. So, you know, it like
also against the law.
Yeah, you know, they can come on my door. They can figure it out. If they really care, they'll come break down my door. I'll give them a few quarters to make up for the handful of plays. So
to touch on that a little bit, I've got this unhealthy obsession with buying PCBs. So I buy a lot of arcade boards and stuff, even if they're broken, because if you own it technically, then you're allowed to do that. So you could buy a piece of junk, beat up PCB, and then you're allowed to emulate it because you own the board.
You know, that's
even if you bought the thing for like 25 cents, you got it in your possession. Pretty sure that's how that works. Don't come after me, Biden.
I'm not on the up and up enough for how that works in America. You know, I'm not even on the up and up for how that works in Canada.
However, sure, I might be giving you bad advice. Yeah, disregard that. If you're in the United States, that's how it works. But yeah.
I like the idea that if the police or whoever ever knocked on your door and like, we know you're emulating all these games, you just walk them to the storage room and go, no, there's all the PCBs. There
Yep.
they all are. I'm allowed to do this.
Yep. You gotta protect
Um,
yourself.
yes, exactly. Gotta protect yourself. Um, Now I also want to ask this one only because you mentioned a game I am very familiar with, a game that I enjoyed the handful of times I replayed it. And that's Actraiser. Actraiser.
Mhm.
And I more or less wanted to ask if you had any experience with Renaissance, I believe is the remaster, quote unquote. Or if you'd much prefer just to stick with the original and, having the
I
NES cartridge or SNES cartridge sitting in storage or what have you.
I actually own those games. Um, both of the original ones on the Super Nintendo. I really really love the first game. The second game I do like a lot, not as much as the first game. And Renaissance is embarrassingly one of those games I bought on Steam and I haven't played it. So yeah, so you just called me out on that. Thanks a lot.
You're very,
No, it's in my list. I really do want to play that game. I just haven't yet.
I completely understand. I actually haven't bought it yet. I have, and I haven't played it, but I have an inspired game from Actraiser. So like, yeah, we're kind of in the same boat. But yeah, I wanted to ask that just because I very much enjoyed the idea of Actraiser and just want to know if you had any opinions on it. I'll ask this one though, because this one I don't know how you're going to answer it. So I could be poking you with a contentious kind of question. But how'd you feel about 2?
I'm
I
trying to.
worry. Oh, I was going to say, I worry my silence has put you into a rage. Or sorry, your silence was you
No,
quietly raging.
I so oh man, I'm trying to put this into words. Uh, I thought some of the things were cool about 2. Like I thought the sprite work was neat, the art was cool, the sound effects were awesome and stuff like that. But the aspect of the city building, um, that management type stuff that you got in the first game was better. I thought. Uh, that's really that in a nutshell. I don't really know how to say that any other way.
Fair enough, and I apologize. I kind of did you dirty with that question to see what would happen. So I apologize for setting up what was probably an unfair question there.
I mean, I really do. I like the art a lot. About the what inspired Volgarr like was partially the art of Actraiser 2, like the the sword and shield, the sprite size. I was initially looking at that in Magic Sword for like how to do the shading techniques and things like that back in the day. Uh, but that's kind of where that stopped for me because I actually thought the first game was just a better game. Like for what I wanted out of Actraiser. Not saying that Actraiser 2 is a bad game. I think it's a fantastic game, but it didn't give me what I wanted out of a sequel for the original Actraiser, if that makes any sense.
Yes, 100%.
It's like they changed genres. It's like all of a sudden I bought Actraiser 2 and it was a kart racer or something. It's like I would have been equally disappointed. Like, you know, but the art's awesome and the gameplay's pretty cool. It's just not what I thought it was going to be at the time. If I didn't know about Actraiser 1, I would tell you that Actraiser 2 is a really great game and I would really like it a lot. But I did play Actraiser 1.
I will say 100%. I agree with everything that you said, because that's more or less my feelings as well. I was never one of the people that got upset about the genre change or the loss of genre part of it, or however you want to phrase it. But yes, everything you said is I very much agree with that one. And again, I apologize for kind of setting you up with a dirty question there, but But thank you for taking it in
No,
stride.
it's totally fine. I like those, but it's like I just couldn't formulate into words um my feelings on it, I guess, because yeah, it's kind of like when I was a kid. I'm gonna tell you this quick little story. Maybe this little anecdote story will clarify this a little bit. When I was a kid, I asked my parents for Christmas. I asked, we're asking, what do you want for Christmas? And a hot ticket was the NES, Nintendo at the time. And I told them that, hey, this is what everybody's doing. I want that. It's so cool. It's way better than the Atari that I currently have, right? If the graphics are so real. Um, so Christmas time rolled around, and my parents bought us a Sega Master System. And initially, I was kind of sad about that because all my friends had Nintendos. They all had the NES, and I was the only kid on the entirety of everyone that we knew that had a Sega Master System. Turned out the Sega Master System had amazing games. It had amazing technology. I even preferred, later on down the road, when I was able to compare the two systems, the controller I thought was better. There's a lot about it that was great. The reason I bring this up in comparison to Actraiser 1 and 2 is because when I was a child, for the longest time, I was super happy with the Sega Master System and stuff like that until, I got exposed to things like The Legend of Zelda or Contra or things that only my friends were playing, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, well, now you have a comparison point, so you have something to be disappointed with. Whereas initially, I ended up being perfectly happy having the Sega Master System. I didn't care. But it was true with the other side too. Like, because we were the only ones that had a Sega Master System, we were also the only ones that had Shinobi and Afterburner and all the unique games that came to the Sega Master System that all of our friends on the block that had Nintendos didn't have. So there is that measurement of that as well. So if you only lived in a world where you didn't know what a Sega Master System was like, or you didn't know what a NES was like, or if you were only playing Actraiser 1 and didn't know 2 existed, or you only were ever exposed to 2, all of those things are fantastic and you'd never have any disappointment, right? But that's to say, like, maybe your first exposure to Actraiser was Actraiser 2 and you thought that was the greatest game ever, and then you went to go play the first one and you're like, well, what is this crap?
Thank you. That is a very good way to look at those kind of I don't know if discussions through comparisons. To look at those kind of comparisons, because like, yeah, 100%. I get what you're saying, and like I was a Nintendo kid growing up. So like whenever I had a chance to go to a friend's that had like a Sega, I was always jealous of the unique games that the Sega seemed to have compared to the Nintendo. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that it was probably a mutual feeling from them to going to see like Nintendo games, right? So like it's interesting. I'm not interested. Sorry, interested is the wrong word. But no, it's a good point to have. To have that like comparison grounding, to be like, if this is what you had, of course, you're going to see the other thing and be like, oh, well, this could have been better. But then, like, you sometimes get a little blinded by the things that you enjoyed about what you knew, right?
Yeah. So imagine this. Actraiser 2 was the first game that came out. So it's Actraiser. Actraiser 2 is the first game that comes out. That game is awesome. It's an awesome game. But then when the Actraiser 2 comes out and it's Actraiser 1, like the mechanics of 1, and you were super happy with the first game that came out, all of a sudden you're like, well, what is this? This isn't what I'm expecting. This isn't what I want. This is not what this franchise should be or whatever. And so you're disappointed, right? But standalone, both of those games are actually really freaking good, right? So, that's my feelings on it. I only like Actraiser 1 more, I think, because it's what I was exposed to. It's what I had for the longest time. And then when the second game came out, I was just surprised it wasn't more of the same. And that's a much bigger, deeper discussion to have with other people, and just in general, that you can have on a philosophical level about how people typically treat like sequelitis, like what constitutes a good sequel or not a good sequel, and all of that, because you can never please everybody, right? A sequel has to be different enough to warrant it being a sequel, but then again, if it's too different, then you alienate the customers that really loved your first game and were your biggest supporting fans.
Yes, again, you've taken the words right out of my mouth. As I was going to say that everything you're saying leads to a much more philosophical thought process or experiment or what have you to the comparison of the games in larger wholes as well, not just for Actraiser 1 versus 2, but for sequels in general, which I'm not equipped to discuss or what have you. But no, yes, I understand completely what you're saying, and I agree completely as well. Because yes, if Actraiser 2 was the first that you enjoyed, one could have been very disappointing and all of that. So yeah, no, yes, I'm 100% on the same page with you, and thank you. That was a very good point to raise.
An even better example of this is actually your namesake here with The Legend of Zelda. Like, there's a lot of divisive opinions on that second game, and I think that second game is freaking brilliant, but it's not like anything else, right? And imagine that when you're younger, oh man, getting the second game, The Legend of Zelda game, and it's everybody's like, what is this? I remember that, like, the whole crowd of people, everybody's buying this game was, what is this?
So
it's not like the first one. None of those happening.
So to speak very briefly to that before I ask you, before we move on and I ask you some other questions. But in my case, I played Zelda 1. I played Link to the Past. I was exposed to the Game Boy game Link's Awakening before I was ever exposed to The Adventure of Link for Zelda 2. So me seeing that after beating one, I don't know if I beat one. I was very young, and it was through the babysitter, experiencing it with a babysitter and what have you. But Link to the Past, I would have beat it or been on the road to beating it by that point, and all of that fun stuff. So, like, having exposure to 3 Zelda games and then seeing Zelda 2, I was, very excited, very confused, and very on the fence, because it wasn't a Zelda game, but, it's a very... Sorry, I shouldn't say it wasn't a Zelda game, but within context, it wasn't a Zelda game. And, like,
yeah,
it was one of those...
the formula.
Yeah, and it was a very unique thing, and, I need to go back to it, especially now that they've made I forget what it's properly called, but, a PC remaster or what have you has been made. I want to go back and try it now, sitting at it, with some quality of life and all of that fun stuff. But yeah, no, I 100% understand, again, that part as well. And I think most people that are aware of Zelda 2 can probably also understand. Now, Kris, I had said earlier on that, the topic of pizza would come up under a different form. And, this is probably where it's going to come out. So outside of gaming, what is it that you do you enjoy doing? What is it that you do to relax? And we already know pizza is one of those things. And by all means, if you want to speak more to pizza, by all means, I do have a follow-up question to it, but I'm going to get that out there first, because there could be more to it than just pizza,
So yeah, making pizzas. That started when I was in high school many, many years ago. That there used to be this place called Pizza Hut that used to actually be a restaurant, and they actually used to make their dough on site instead of buying a bunch of frozen crap that is mailed in from wherever. So I used to get up at 4:00 in the morning, go to Pizza Hut, and I would turn on the radio really loud, listen to Metallica all morning long, and make the dough. And I was there by myself. And when the dough was made and everything was prepped, the store was, time to open. And then, all the employees would come in and get ready for the day, start making pizzas. But that's when I left. So my job was literally to get up in the morning, listen to a bunch of awesome music, make some pizza dough, and then go home. and I got paid really good for that. It was very relaxing. It's probably one of the least stressful, happy times in my life working doing that. I have very, very fond memories of that. So now, whenever I'm stressed, in video games, it can be very stressful. I'll take breaks, or I have these like mini vacations or whatever, where I'll work on my pizza game, I call it. I do all kinds of crazy things. Like I've tried coming up with all kinds of different recipes, using different flours, importing things from Italy, different kinds of yeast, different kinds of fermentation times. I own like 7 different pizza ovens. Excuse me, I almost burped in the mic. That's really gross. Leave that in there. Don't edit that out. That's the real me. Anyway, 7 different pizza ovens. And I'm really into it. I make my own sauces from scratch, and grown tomatoes, like all this stuff. I have tons and tons and tons of pizza making equipment at my home because I really love doing that. Aside from that, I like to restore arcade machines. I'll buy broken arcade machines and fix them up and make them look like they're brand spanking new off the showroom floor. And some I keep and some I sell. The ones I sell, I only sell them for what it costs me to fix them. I don't make a profit on it. I just do it for the enjoyment and for keeping them out of the dump. And same with some pinball machines. But I haven't done that so much in the last, I'd say since my son was born, about 6 years. So I tinker with it a little bit. But the problem with working on those is that, one, I've got 2 little kids that demand a lot of time. But those machines are extremely dangerous. They're commercial machines. If your kid crawls into the back of one of those because the back was open playing hide and seek or something, and touch a flyback or something like that, it's 50,000 volts. Like, you know what I mean? So most of my machines now are sitting in storage, but I was really passionate about that. I still love doing that, and I hope to get back to it now that the kids are getting a little bit older and have a little bit more common sense. And more importantly, can follow instructions, like don't touch that, daddy says it's dangerous, right? So I'll probably get back into that pretty soon again. The other thing that I like is I really love driving cars and having and owning really weird, quirky vehicles. I like that. So I'm constantly going through a rotation of various vehicles that are like unusual and things that that you don't typically see. And I like to work on cars. So that's the thing. My wife encouraged me to do this because when you make video games, you do a lot of sitting at computers and stuff. And she's like, for your health, why don't you try, getting up and, making something with your hand. Like she suggested like doing like woodwork or furniture or something of that nature. And that's what gave me the idea back in the day to, work on restoring arcade machines. It's like a merger of my 2 loves, working on video games, but then also, working with your hands. So there's that. I think, yeah, I like to drive cars and stuff. I find that is very fascinating. When I was a little kid, I always thought I was going to grow up to be either be an astronaut or a fighter pilot or a race car driver. But I guess that's kind of like, where that kind of came from.
So, thank you for sharing all that. I have a few lightning questions. I shouldn't say it that way because the lightning round's coming up. But I have a few just like quick questions about all of those things, if you don't mind me bugging you. Because, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I do kind of want to hit you with a few things just to relate to that one, if you're okay with it.
Absolutely.
So, on the topic of pizza, 2 quick questions. How do you feel, and this is going to be contentious, I'm sure.
Don't you ask me about pineapple.
Okay, then I won't.
No, I'm kidding. Was the question about pineapple?
Yeah, it was.
Go ahead, ask me.
It was just going to be, how do you feel about pineapple? Because I know that's a contentious one, and I'm just curious what your thought is.
My thought is, if you're going to eat pizza and you like pineapple on your pizza, I don't give a bleep whether or not there's pineapple on the pizza. I don't have to eat it. Right?
That is very fair. Yes.
It's not my food. It's not my food, so I'm not going to get mad at it.
That is a... Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, with that said, I have had pineapple on pizza, and I've had it sometimes where it was really gross, and sometimes paired with things that's really good. So I do believe pineapple can be put on pizza, but people are making things that are called pizza that aren't even pizza. So you know, it's kind of like, people obsessing with pineapple. Like, dude, when you're making a pizza shaped thing that has barbecue sauce on it instead of pizza sauce and chicken, that's okay. But you're gonna complain about pineapple? Give me a break. Like,
You know,
give me a break. That's not pizza either. That's barbecue chicken on flatbread.
I thank you. I don't have as many strong opinions on pizza to even bridge that one, but I understand where you're going with that. And as someone that can appreciate the semantics of things, I can appreciate the argument that you are making.
Yeah, I mean, if someone was going to try to force me to eat their dinner, I might have an opinion on it. But it's your food, your dinner. You knock yourself out. If you enjoy it, that's awesome.
So, speaking of that, I think this is a good segue from that one. If you were making a pizza for your dinner, what would your perfect pizza be that you would pitch to someone to try?
Ooh, okay, so that's actually that's a really good question. So what I do, and I do this when I try pizza restaurants that I've never been to before. I will order a pepperoni pizza with black olive, and then that's it, and see what they do. That's literally it, and see how it comes out. Like, if the ratios are correct, if the pizza dough has been fermented correctly, if it has the right bite and chew, like all that stuff. Um, Now, keep in mind, I don't do this at freaking Papa John's or Pizza Hut or Domino's, because those places, I mean, that's not, you know what you're getting when you go there, right? Like, so I'm talking about, like, if you go to an actual pizza place, like a real pizza restaurant, and that's where I do that. And so when I go to make it for myself, that's one of the things I do. It's one of my favorites. It's one of my go-tos. And then sometimes I'll put, like, uh, I don't know what they call them where you're from, but we'll just say here they're like hot peppers, I guess. Would be something I throw in there. Is I like pepperoni and sausage and black olive and hot peppers. Sometimes I throw onions and green pepper and red pepper on there. Bell peppers, excuse me. Um, I'm I don't have. I can tell you that probably my least favorite ingredient is mushroom, but I still use it because there's appropriate uses for it. But yeah, I don't really have a super favorite, but I do. Other than that one I told you about when I try to judge other restaurants based on the basics.
So, thank you for that. I'm not really a olive person. However, my father listens to this podcast and loves putting olives on pizza, so I'm sure he's sitting there
I'm hoping
happy.
black, because only psychopaths put green olives on pizza, period. That's like, what? Talking about pineapple. You watch somebody put a green olive on their pizza, man, you run as fast as you can. They're going to
Um,
stab you later while smiling.
so I can't speak to that one. However, I will. I'll let my father let me know if he feels he's a psychopath in the future whenever he listens to this episode.
I'm sure there's an appropriate use for green olives on a pizza at some point. Yeah.
So, but thank you for that. Other two quick ones. If someone went to you, they're like, "Hey, I want to try an arcade game," because, like you said, you have proclivity to enjoying them, to fixing them, what have you, what have you. If someone's like, "I want to play an arcade game," is there an arcade game that you'd be like, "Go to this one, try this one first," or what have you?
Has this person ever played an arcade game? Like, they've never even seen one before, or they're just saying, like, in my collection, which one should they play?
Let's go with your collection, because in my world of this question, someone knows what Pac-Man is. They know what Miss Pac-Man. They know what Dig Dug and all of that is. So yes, let's go with your collection.
Um, Let me think about that for just a moment here. if they were to, and what am I trying to accomplish here? Am I trying to get them into playing arcade games?
Sure. Or
Or
just
am I
like,
just trying to show them one that I think is cool?
let's go with one that you think would be cool. I think
Not
that's
trying
the
to suck them
safer.
into the hobby or anything.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
That's the safer one, I think.
I think I would go with the early Star Wars game, Atari Star Wars game. Let's see, what else would I do? You know what I'm talking about, right?
I don't know if you're meaning the one where you sat down and it was the
Vector
vector.
graphics. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
That one.
Yes.
Yep. But there's stand-up ones too. But that one, and then sure that one, and that's a good one. I would either say like maybe Capcom Dungeons and Dragons, or that's probably it. That'd probably be it. If it's somebody that I'm trying to like, just show them something cool that might get them into it.
Fair enough. And having played both of those, I can understand why. Because, one of them was a very cool 3D game in a time when 3D was not something you would see a lot of. And then, the D&D Capcom games were just, I'm pretty sure there was a handful of them. But either way, the one that I'm aware of at the very least was a fantastic and interesting mix of like D&D RPG as a side scroller, as a genre I'm gonna go with that you haven't seen much for side scroll beat 'em ups since, outside of maybe Dragon's Crown or what have you,
Yeah, yeah. There's they made two of them for Capcom. That did a Tower of Doom and a Shadow of Mystara, or a Shadow over Mystara. I forget. I always forget the name of that one technically, but yeah, those are they're fun because they kind of tell a story and allow you to laugh and play together. Because one's like it's Star Wars and the cool sound effects in 3D, and the other one is more of a good time with your friends, standing around laughing and having a shared experience. And
Exactly.
everybody loves Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy and stuff. At least I would suppose they were. And it's also a safe bet because I don't know if this person is a female or a male, and I didn't want to ask ahead of time, so I was just going to assume it could have been anybody.
Fair enough. Yes, because
Or anything in between. I don't want to exclude anybody, but you know what I mean.
Yes, and also in that one, fair enough, because there's different classes, different genders. So like you're not locked to only having to play the big burly muscular dude. And I only say that because I actually have friends that don't like playing those kind of games 100% because they appreciate representation and being able to play someone that's not just like another big burly white dude. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, Kris, as I said, I only wanted to hit you with a few of those random ones just related to those things. Now, like I said, I didn't want to take up too much more of your time, but before I let you go, I do want to ask you some lighthearted, nonsensical, and more or less random actual lightning round questions. Now, these are meant to be quick, no judgment, random. Don't think too hard on them because they fall apart very easily under that. So yeah, if you're okay with that, I will hit you with that, and then we can start getting you out on your Thursday evening.
Awesome. Let's go.
Do you think The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time would have played? I'm not going to ask that one. I've asked this one enough. Let's try and get a newer one or a different one. I don't have as much control over these bots. What game character would you happily sit and watch have a 30-minute Dragon Ball style power up?
Hey.
Sorry, I didn't hear anything there.
Oh, you didn't hear that? Oh, I that came out so fast. It was just no one heard it. It was Ryu from Street Fighter.
Yes, I completely understand because, who else is better fit to have that kind of, have that kind of arc, given that he kind of did have that arc across
Yeah,
the.
and then the opening to the way that Super Street Fighter is, where he's all gigantic on the screen, like super huge, and he's just like sucking in all that power. Yeah, that's that whole thing. I can sit there and watch that all day. I have sat there and watched that all day.
So, yes, thank you for that one. What character in media is most likely to assume that claustrophobia is a fear of crowds?
I'm sorry. Character in media. Oh man, I don't know if this person's a character, but I'm gonna say The Rock, just because that's the first person that came to mind.
Yeah, sure. Yep. Thank you. Yeah, I'm not gonna speak to their
I don't know.
their intelligence. Which game character do you think is most likely to think of the Holy Roman Empire at least once a week?
Wow, that's not me. Um, which game character is likely? I'm gonna say Mario.
Thank you for that. Thank you for participating in the lightning round questions there. Especially since the beginning was me trying to fan out of ones that are overdone at this point, or at least I'd like a break from. So thank you for that.
I'm going to say to your listeners who didn't get to see that some of those were actually really funny.
Well,
Earlier ones.
look, if you want to answer them, by all means, we can run through them as well. I have no problem with that. So yeah, so if you're okay with it, then sure. Do you think The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time would have played much differently if it was The Legend of Zelda Flute of Time?
You say flute?
Yes.
I think it would have sounded different, but I think it would have probably played the same.
So yeah, thank you for that one. Typically that is trombone. I that is kind of a placeholder. I flip it up or try to at least, and I panicked there, not thinking or realizing that I was just asking another wind instrument.
Yeah, instead of thinking, well, the flute and the ocarina aren't that much different.
What personality traits do you feel a pet cat would need to have the name Captain Falcon?
It'd have to be a dog.
The cat doesn't deserve it, only a dog.
No. Yep.
Fair enough. If you were a transformer...
No offense to cat people. Sorry. No offense to cat people. Don't want to make anybody angry.
If you were a transformer, is there a vehicle you wouldn't transform into on principle alone?
Oh, wow. That's actually a really good question. I wouldn't transform into what vehicle I wouldn't turn into out of principle alone.
Yes.
Yeah, a nuclear bomber.
Yeah, that's... Yeah, sure, yep. I can understand that one.
First thing that came to mind, though, was suppository, but I was like, that's not technically a vehicle.
They do make them as little cameras now, so maybe?
Man, that would not be good.
I can understand why you would not want to be either, though, in any form. Now, Kris, as I said, I didn't want to take up too much more of your time after those lightning rounds. However, if there was anything else you did want to discuss, a cool game, what you're doing, something you feel more people should just be more aware of, by all means, the floor is yours. And please also let everyone know where they can find more information about you, which I'll also be including in the episode description.
Oh, cool. Well, there is something neat happening that I can't quite openly discuss right now, but if you want to learn more about that neat happening thing that's about to happen, God, sometimes I hate marketing stuff, but you would find that happening on at Volgarr on Twitter or X, and at Crazy Viking Studios on Facebook. And I think that's it for now.
So, yeah. So
And Digital Eclipse. I'm sorry about that. There's Digital Eclipse.
no worries. I was going to ask if that was, if you were alluding to the Digital Eclipse project, I think is the safest way to put it, to not be prying, because I don't like doing that. So thank you. That answered that before I could get it out there.
Yes.
So yeah, so definitely I will 100% make sure that, you know, the Twitter and the Facebook as well as Digital Eclipse is in the description, so that people can follow that up for more information. And also I'll say this in advance, I apologize if, you know, by the time this episode comes out, it's out there. So, you know, anyone that's looking, it might already be out. More information might already be announced or out there. And I'm not saying that knowingly. I'm just saying that it just could be. So, you know, something to look forward to, basically.
Yeah.
Now, as I said, though, Kris, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. So if there wasn't anything else, I will 100% let you get on with your evening.
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Well, if you don't have anything, then I'm definitely going to let you get on with your day then.
All right. Thank you very much.
You are more than welcome. Like I said early on, thank you. I'm happy that we were able to work this out and make time, and I appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
So thanks again to Kris for making time to have this conversation with me, and thank you for joining us on the Red Tunic podcast, as well as a special thanks to Ron Jenkins for the use of music from the title track from Roads Deep. And be sure to check out the episode description for links to socials, websites, and other means that allow you to learn more about or support Kris, as well as the podcast. While you're doing that, share, like, follow, or whatever else you think makes the algorithm work. Thanks. Until next time.